In the great chamber of the Galactic Alliance, the voices of many alien leaders echoed against the walls. The chamber was bright with shining crystal lights, and giant banners of different star systems hung from the tall ceilings. Every race in the galaxy had sent their counselors, proud and confident, each one eager to speak louder than the rest. At the far end of the chamber, sitting at a long polished table, was Commander Daniel Hayes. He wore the uniform of Earth, simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor of the other races. His face was calm, though inside he held back anger and shame. Around him, the council members laughed at Earth, mocking it as if it were nothing but a backwater planet with no strength to protect itself. One alien, Counselor Varric of the Thalarians, spoke with a cruel smile. His voice carried through the room as he said that humans were a planet-bound species, weak and inexperienced, destined only to serve stronger powers. His words caused many of the other members to laugh, their strange voices mixing together like a storm of insults. Daniel Hayes kept his hands folded, his eyes steady, but he felt the sting of their words. To answer them now would be useless. To argue would only feed their laughter. So he stayed silent, even as his world was insulted before the entire galaxy. The Council did not know the truth. They believed Earth's fleets were small, old, and powerless. They believed Earth's technology was decades behind theirs. They thought humans were too divided and too young to matter in the galaxy's affairs. They did not know what was hidden beyond their sight. They did not know that humanity had been preparing in secret, building something no one had ever seen. While the other races enjoyed their comfort and arrogance, humanity had been working quietly, hidden from all eyes. Far from the shining chamber of the Alliance, deep within the blue oceans of Earth and under its tall mountains, great plans had been set into motion many years ago. Earth's leaders had known the day would come when humanity would no longer be able to hide from the galaxy. They had known the arrogance of other species would one day threaten their survival, so they had created Project Horizon. This project was kept in the shadows, known only to a few, guarded with silence and secrecy. It was not only a plan but a promise, that Earth would never bow down, no matter how much the galaxy laughed at them. Admiral Laura Carter, one of the leaders of this secret effort, sat in a quiet control room far beneath the surface of Earth. The room was filled with glowing screens, maps of stars, and hidden channels of information flowing in silence. Her sharp eyes watched the feed from the Alliance chamber, where Daniel Hayes sat enduring the laughter of the aliens. She listened to every word, her heart steady, her thoughts firm. To the world, Earth looked weak, but here she knew the truth. Behind heavy blast doors and miles of stone were vast hangars where colossal starships waited in silence. To most of humanity, these ships did not exist. To the galaxy, they were only dreams, but to Admiral Carter and her people, they were real. She whispered softly to herself that the day was coming when Earth would no longer need to hide. Daniel Hayes felt alone in that chamber, but he was not without support. Across the galaxy, hidden stations and secret bases monitored his every move. Engineers, pilots, and soldiers who had trained for years waited for the signal that one day might come. On Earth, in hidden labs and factories, scientists worked night and day building weapons and engines that no alien race had ever seen. Men like David Clark, a quiet engineer with rough hands and brilliant ideas, gave their lives to this work. Women like Rachel Monroe, a skilled technician who checked every system 3 times over, lived only for the success of this hidden dream. They all knew the same truth. One day humanity would need to rise, and when that day came, they would be ready. The Council continued to laugh. They cut Daniel Hayes off when he tried to speak, ignoring his attempts to explain that Earth deserved fair trade and equal voice. Instead, they reminded him that Earth had no power to enforce its words. They said humans should be grateful to even be allowed a seat in the chamber. Hayes sat quietly, his fist tight against the table, his heart burning. He wanted to tell them the truth. He wanted to stand up and declare that Earth was not weak, that they were not fools, that hidden in the dark were ships that could shatter their arrogance. But he could not yet. Humanity's secret had to remain hidden until the right moment. So he endured. He let their laughter echo, knowing in his heart that the day of truth was drawing near. As the meeting ended, Hayes stood and walked slowly out of the chamber. The alien counselors barely noticed him leave. To them, he was already forgotten, a representative of a world that meant nothing, a man whose words were wasted. But Hayes carried their mockery like fire in his chest. He thought of his people back on Earth. He thought of the engineers working in secret, the soldiers training in silence, the ships waiting in the dark. He thought of Admiral Carter, of President William Carter, and of General Megan Lewis, who all shared the same vision. Earth would not stay silent forever. Earth would not stay weak. The day would come when the galaxy would see them as they truly were. As his transport carried him away from the great city where the council met, Hayes looked out at the stars. They stretched endlessly across the black sky, countless and cold. Somewhere among those stars, hidden beyond the maps of the Alliance, was Earth's secret fleet, a fleet born of patience, of anger, of survival. He thought of the laughter of the counselors and how quickly it would turn to silence when the truth was revealed. He let the thought calm him. Their insults would not matter for long. Their arrogance would not last forever. Humanity's secret was waiting, and one day the galaxy would learn to fear the very people they had mocked. Daniel Hayes returned to Earth with a heavy heart. The silence of space on his way back felt colder than ever before. He carried the words of the Galactic Council with him, each insult like a blade that had cut into his pride. When his ship touched down at the secure base in the Nevada desert, he stepped out with calm movements, though his mind still burned with anger. Waiting for him were President William Carter and General Megan Lewis, both standing under the desert sun, their expressions sharp with worry. Hayes saluted them, and they could see in his eyes that the meeting had gone as expected. Once again, Earth had been treated as a child, dismissed and mocked by the stronger powers of the galaxy. Inside the underground command center, far below the surface of the desert, the three leaders sat at a large round table. The walls around them glowed with faint blue light, filled with screens showing news from across the galaxy. General Lewis spoke first, her voice firm but tired. She said the council would never respect Earth, no matter how much they asked for fair treatment. President Carter agreed, saying that the insults had gone beyond politics. The other races wanted Earth weak because a strong Earth would threaten their control. Daniel Hayes nodded, saying he had felt their contempt with every word. He told them that Counselor Varric had declared humans destined to serve, and that the others had laughed at him without shame. The room fell silent. They all knew what that meant. Earth could no longer rely on the goodwill of the Council. It was time to think of their own path. Deep below the desert floor, a hidden world stretched for miles. This was the heart of Project Horizon, a secret built over decades. Huge blast doors guarded the way, and beyond them lay vast hangars carved into stone. Inside these hangars rested ships unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. They were not rusty freighters or outdated cruisers, but sleek giants of steel and light, built in silence while the galaxy looked away. Engineers and technicians moved between them like ants, small against the size of the massive machines. Sparks flew as welding torches cut metal, and engines hummed as systems were tested again and again. The ships were alive, though they slept, waiting for the day they would rise into the stars. David Clark stood on one of the platforms above the hangar floor. His clothes were stained with grease, his hands calloused from years of work. He wiped sweat from his forehead as he looked down at the ship below him. It was enormous, its hull shining with new armor, its engines quiet but full of power. Rachel Monroe stood beside him, a tablet in her hands as she read numbers and codes. She told David that the shielding systems were stable, stronger than even their best tests had predicted. David nodded, saying quietly that they would need every bit of that strength when the time came. Both of them knew what was at stake. They were not just building ships. They were building survival. President Carter and General Lewis toured the hangars with Hayes at their side. Soldiers snapped to attention as they passed, their faces young but determined. These men and women had trained in secret, preparing for a war that might one day come. They had studied not only Earth's old tactics but also the patterns of alien fleets. They learned how to fight enemies who believed they were invincible. General Lewis spoke to the soldiers, telling them their patience would be rewarded. She reminded them that they trained not for conquest, but to defend their people, their families, and their world. Her words filled the air with a sense of purpose. These soldiers were not fighting for pride. They were fighting because they refused to bow to anyone. In the deepest part of the base, the group entered a control chamber. Maps of stars filled the walls, showing routes across the galaxy. Red lines marked where Earth was denied trade, and blue dots showed the colonies struggling without support. Hayes pointed to Europa Station, where humans lived under constant threat of alien raids. Supplies were scarce and the Council refused to help. He said that soon the Dominion or another enemy would strike, and the Council would once again look away. President Carter looked at the map and clenched his jaw. He said Earth had to stand alone because no one else would stand with them. Admiral Laura Carter appeared on one of the screens, her voice steady and calm. She reported that the fleet was ready. Systems had been checked, weapons had been polished, and engines could fire at a moment's notice. She reminded them that the fleet was hidden, scattered in secret hangars across Earth, the Moon, and beyond. No alien race had seen them, and no spy had returned to tell tales. She said humanity had masked its progress behind decoys of weakness, using old ships and false reports to trick the galaxy into thinking Earth was still behind. The ruse had worked. The Council believed the lie, but soon the truth would break free. The leaders sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their choices pressing on them. President Carter spoke at last, saying they could not reveal their hand too soon. If they moved too early, the galaxy would unite against them, but if they waited too long, Earth's colonies might fall. It was a delicate balance. General Lewis agreed, saying that patience had carried them this far, but patience had its limits. Hayes added that the Council's arrogance would only grow, and the Dominion's hunger for expansion would not stop. He said the time was coming, and when it did, the galaxy would finally see Earth as it truly was. Meanwhile, life on the surface of Earth went on as if nothing was hidden below. Families walked in the cities, children played in the parks, and people went to work, unaware of the secret shield being built for them. They saw only the weakness the Council mocked, never knowing the truth. In quiet towns and busy cities alike, the people of Earth dreamed of a future where they were free to travel the stars without fear. They did not know it yet, but their safety rested on the shoulders of the men and women hidden underground, giving everything for a fleet that might one day save them. As the night fell in the desert, Daniel Hayes stood outside the base looking at the stars above. He thought of the Council's laughter and the ships sleeping below his feet. He thought of the men and women who had given their lives to keep the secret. He thought of the engineers and soldiers who lived only for the day the truth would be revealed. The stars shone down cold and distant, but Hayes felt a quiet fire inside him. The Council believed Earth was powerless. The galaxy believed humanity was weak. They were wrong. The secret was alive, and the day would come when the whole universe would see it. Until then, Hayes and the others would wait, silent and steady, holding the weight of the secret that would one day change everything. The first sign of danger came quietly like a shadow crossing the stars. Reports from Europa Station arrived at Earth late one night. The messages were broken, filled with static and fear. The Dravari Dominion had struck without warning. Their ships came out of dark space, surrounding the human colony with weapons ready. The colony tried to resist, but its defenses were small and weak compared to the Dominion's mighty warships. Within hours, the station was burning, its shields torn apart, its people begging for help. Thousands of civilians were lost, their cries echoing into silence. The Galactic Council said nothing. They looked the other way, pretending not to see. For them, Earth's suffering was not worth their attention. On Earth, the news hit like a storm. Families wept, their loved ones gone. Anger spread through the cities, through the towns, and through the quiet places where people gathered to mourn. But along with the anger came something stronger: resolve. Humanity had been insulted, ignored, and mocked for years. Now they had been attacked, and the Council had refused to act. The time for patience was ending. General Megan Lewis called for an emergency meeting. President William Carter, Admiral Laura Carter, and Commander Daniel Hayes all gathered in the underground base to decide what must be done. The room was tense, filled with maps and screens showing the destruction of Europa Station. The silence was broken by General Lewis, her voice sharp. She said they could not wait any longer. If they stayed silent, more colonies would fall, more families would suffer. Admiral Laura Carter agreed. She said the fleet was ready, the ships prepared, the weapons waiting. Daniel Hayes added that this was not only about revenge but about survival. If they allowed the Dominion to continue unchecked, Earth itself would be next. President Carter listened to them all before he spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. He said the day had come. The secret could no longer stay hidden. The time had come to reveal the fleet. Orders spread quickly across the hidden network of Project Horizon. Deep in the underground hangars, alarms sounded. Engines that had slept for years came alive with a deep roar. Giant ships lifted slowly from their docks, their hulls glowing as power flowed through them. Lights flickered on. Weapon systems hummed and shields powered up. Pilots rushed to their stations, soldiers strapped into their seats, and technicians gave final checks. David Clark stood on the platform once more, his eyes filled with pride as the ship he had worked on for so many years came to life. Rachel Monroe read out numbers with steady hands, confirming that everything was in order. Around them, the fleet that had been a dream now became real. Across the moon, hidden bases opened their doors. Vast caverns that had been silent for decades released ships into the darkness of space. On Mars, secret factories powered down their covers and revealed carriers and cruisers hidden beneath red dust. In the asteroid belt, camouflage stations sent out drones and fighters, all heading toward their rally point. The galaxy had no idea. The Council still believed Earth had nothing but a few old ships, but now humanity's true power was awakening. In one of the briefing rooms, young pilots gathered. Ethan Brooks, a man with sharp eyes and steady hands, checked his flight suit as he listened to his orders. Beside him, Natalie Green tightened her straps and smiled with determination. They had trained in silence for years, preparing for a day that had always felt far away. Now it was real. Ethan thought of his family back home, people who had no idea of the secret he had carried. Natalie thought of the insults she had heard about Earth, the way the galaxy looked down on them. Both of them were ready to fight, not for glory but for their people's survival. Back in the command chamber, Admiral Laura Carter stood before a giant screen showing the fleet's formation. Ships aligned with perfect precision, each one a piece of the larger whole. She gave orders with calm authority, her voice filling the room. General Lewis monitored the soldiers, her sharp eyes watching every detail. President Carter stood with his hands behind his back, his face set with determination. Daniel Hayes, who had endured the Council's laughter, now felt the fire of pride. The time had come to answer the insults not with words but with strength. As the fleet moved into position, word of Europa's destruction continued to spread across Earth. The people grieved, but when they heard whispers of a secret fleet rising, hope began to bloom. For the first time, they believed they were not helpless. For the first time, they felt they could stand against the galaxy's cruelty. Mothers held their children and whispered that heroes were in the stars watching over them. Fathers stood tall, knowing that humanity would no longer bow. In the quiet of space, the fleet gathered. The flagship, the USS Horizon, stood at the center, its massive hull gleaming in the darkness. Admiral Carter stood on its bridge, looking out at the endless stars. Her heart was calm, though she knew the battles ahead would be brutal. She thought of every life lost at Europa Station, every insult thrown at Earth, every laugh from the Council chamber. She whispered to herself that humanity would not be silent anymore. Around her, officers checked systems, pilots prepared for launch, and the hum of power filled the ship like a heartbeat. The Dravari Dominion was preparing another strike, unaware of what was waiting for them. They believed Earth was weak. They believed humans would surrender or die without resistance. They did not know about the fleet hidden in the shadows. They did not know about the years of sacrifice, the endless nights of work, the silent training of soldiers. They did not know that the humans they mocked were ready to fight. And so they came, confident in their power, blind to the truth. As their warships moved toward Mars, Earth's fleet followed quietly, hidden by advanced cloaking fields. Admiral Carter watched the Dominion ships on her screen, her expression steady. She knew the time was close. She gave the order to prepare weapons, to ready shields, to hold formation. The officers moved with precision, each one trained for this moment. Ethan Brooks sat in his fighter, breathing slowly, his hands firm on the controls. Natalie Green sat in hers, her eyes sharp with focus. Across the fleet, thousands of men and women waited for the signal that would change everything. In that moment, silence filled the stars. Two forces were about to meet, one arrogant and proud, the other patient and hidden. Humanity's secret, born of years of struggle, was about to step into the light. The insults, the laughter, the arrogance of the galaxy would soon face the truth. Earth was ready. The fleet was alive. The day of revelation had come. The Dravari Dominion moved toward Mars with confidence. Their fleet was large, filled with dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers that had destroyed countless enemies before. They expected no resistance. To them, Earth was weak, a planet with old ships and no real defenses. The commanders of the Dominion laughed as their ships entered the orbit of Mars, ready to strike at human settlements. They believed it would be another quick victory, another step in their expansion across the stars. But this time, they were wrong. In the silence of space, Earth's hidden armada appeared. It began with a shimmer as if the stars themselves shifted. One by one, massive human warships uncloaked, their steel hulls gleaming with light. The fleet stretched across the void in perfect formation, hundreds of ships strong. At the center stood the flagship USS Horizon, its size greater than any vessel the Dominion had ever seen. On its bridge, Admiral Laura Carter stood tall, her eyes locked on the enemy. Around her, officers moved with calm precision, ready for the battle that was about to begin. The Dominion commanders were shocked. They had been certain Earth possessed nothing more than a handful of outdated ships. Now, before them, was a fleet that rivaled their own in strength, a fleet that had appeared from nowhere. For the first time, the Dominion hesitated. Their arrogance faltered as they realized they had underestimated humanity. Still, they were warriors, and pride would not let them retreat. Orders rang out, and the Dominion fleet prepared for battle. Admiral Carter raised her hand, and her voice carried across the bridge. She gave the order to engage. At once, Earth's fleet came alive. Rail cannons charged, their barrels glowing with energy. Drones swarmed from carriers, spreading across the battlefield like a storm of steel. Fighters launched in waves, pilots like Ethan Brooks and Natalie Green leading the charge. Their ships streaked through space, engines burning bright as they dove into enemy lines. The battle had begun. The first volley shook the stars. Rail cannons fired, sending streams of metal at speeds faster than light. The projectiles tore through Dominion shields, smashing into their hulls with devastating force. Explosions lit the void, pieces of metal scattering into nothingness. Dominion ships returned fire, beams of energy cutting through the darkness. Human shields flared as they absorbed the impact, holding strong against the assault. On the horizon, Admiral Carter gave new commands, shifting formations, guiding her fleet like a master at chess. Ethan Brooks dodged enemy fire, weaving through explosions with skill. He targeted a Dominion cruiser, firing missiles that struck its engines. Flames erupted as the cruiser spun out of control, colliding with another ship. Natalie Green fought beside him, her voice steady as she called out enemy positions. Together they moved like a single force, their trust built from years of training. Around them, human pilots fought with unmatched courage, each one determined to protect their world. On the ground, people across Earth and Mars watched the battle unfold on screens. Families gathered in homes, soldiers in bases stood silent, and leaders in hidden chambers leaned forward with hope. For the first time, they saw the fleet that had been kept secret for so long. For the first time, they saw that humanity was not weak. Pride swelled in their hearts as explosions lit the sky above Mars. They whispered prayers for the pilots and cheered as enemy ships fell. The Dominion pushed harder, sending their dreadnoughts forward. These massive ships were armed with weapons strong enough to destroy cities. They opened fire, their blasts shaking the shields of human warships. One of Earth's carriers shuddered under the impact, alarms blaring as damage spread across its decks. But before the Dominion could finish it, drones swarmed the dreadnought, attaching explosives to its hull. A moment later, the ship erupted in a ball of fire, its pieces scattering into the void. The cheers of human soldiers filled the comm channels. Admiral Carter's eyes stayed sharp. She knew victory would not come easily. She ordered the fleet to tighten formation, protecting the weaker ships while the strongest pushed forward. General Lewis, watching from the command chamber on Earth, relayed orders to ground defenses, ensuring colonies remained safe. President Carter stood beside her, silent but firm, his eyes never leaving the screen. Daniel Hayes, who had suffered the council's laughter, now felt pride as he watched his people stand tall. The insults of the galaxy no longer mattered. The truth was here, written in fire across the stars. As the battle raged, the horizon unleashed its full power. Its rail cannons glowed brighter than suns, firing shots that shattered Dominion cruisers in seconds. Its shielding held strong, absorbing blows that would have destroyed lesser ships. On its decks, soldiers worked without rest, passing orders, repairing damage, and keeping the ship alive. Admiral Carter stood at the heart of it all, steady as stone, guiding her people with courage. The Dominion began to break. Their commanders shouted orders, but fear spread through their ranks. They had never faced humans like this. They had never imagined such power hidden in silence. One by one, their ships fell, their pride crumbling with every explosion. Ethan Brooks and Natalie Green led their squadrons deeper into enemy lines, striking at weak points, cutting apart what remained of their defenses. Drones overwhelmed their fighters, swarming until the skies were filled with wreckage. Then came the final strike. The Horizon charged its main cannon, a weapon kept secret even from most of Earth's soldiers. Energy gathered at its core, humming through the ship like a storm. Admiral Carter gave the order and the cannon fired. A beam of pure power shot through the void, tearing a Dominion dreadnought in half. The explosion was so great that it lit the battlefield brighter than a star. Silence followed as both sides paused in awe. Then slowly the Dominion fleet began to retreat. Earth had won. The battlefield was filled with smoke and debris, but the human fleet still stood strong. Cheers erupted across the comm channels. Pilots crying out in victory, soldiers raising their fists. Ethan Brooks leaned back in his cockpit, his chest rising with relief. Natalie Green smiled, her voice tired but filled with joy. Admiral Carter allowed herself a small nod, but her eyes stayed serious. She knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion had been defeated, but others would come. Still, for this moment, Earth had shown its strength. Across Earth, people poured into the streets, cheering and celebrating. For the first time in history, humanity had stood against one of the galaxy's strongest powers and won. Families hugged, children laughed, and hope filled the air. No longer would they live in the shadow of mockery. No longer would they be seen as weak. They were part of the stars now, equals to any race. On the horizon, Admiral Carter looked out at the field of wreckage. She thought of the lives lost at Europa Station, of the families who would never see their loved ones again. She promised quietly that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. She turned to her officers and told them to prepare for what was to come. Humanity had taken its first step into a new future, and the galaxy would never see them the same again. The battle above Mars was over, but its echoes would carry across the stars. The Dominion had been humbled. The Galactic Council would hear of it, and every race that had laughed at Earth would now whisper in fear. Humanity had revealed its secret, and the universe would never again forget their name. The news of Earth's victory spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, whispers turned to shouts, and the once dismissed humans became the subject of every conversation. The Dravari Dominion had been crushed, their mighty fleet broken by the very people they had mocked. On countless worlds, citizens watched the recordings of the battle above Mars. They saw the hidden fleet, the massive warships, the fearless pilots, and the blazing cannons that had turned arrogance into ashes. The laughter that once filled the council chambers was gone. Now there was only silence, fear, and a growing respect for the species called human. In the chamber of the Galactic Council, the mood had shifted. Where once the voices of alien leaders had been filled with mockery, now they were low and uncertain. Counselor Varric, who had called humans weak, sat with his head lowered. Around him, others who had laughed now whispered nervously, their pride shaken. They all knew the truth. They had underestimated Earth, and now the balance of power in the galaxy had changed. When Commander Daniel Hayes entered the chamber, every eye turned toward him. No longer was he invisible, no longer a man they ignored. He walked with steady steps, his uniform plain but his presence powerful. Above him, holographic images of Earth's fleet shimmered, proof of everything the Council had denied. Hayes stood before them, his face calm. He did not raise his voice, but his words carried weight. He said Earth had not sought war, but war had been forced upon them. He said they had asked for respect, but were given insults. He said they had asked for peace, but were given attacks. And so Earth had answered in the only way left to them. His words filled the chamber with silence. No one laughed now. No one dared to interrupt. They listened, their pride broken, their fear rising. Back on Earth, the people celebrated, but their leaders remained cautious. President William Carter addressed the planet from the Capitol, his voice strong but thoughtful. He told them that humanity had proven its strength, but that strength must be used wisely. He said they would not seek conquest, but they would never again bow their heads. He reminded them of Europa Station, of the lives lost, and said their memory would guide humanity forward. General Megan Lewis stood beside him, her face stern as she promised that Earth's defenses would remain ready. Admiral Laura Carter, speaking from the bridge of the horizon, declared that the fleet would stand guard over their world, always watchful, always prepared. In the homes of Earth, families watched these speeches with pride. Mothers held their children close, fathers stood tall, and young men and women dreamed of one day joining the fleet. For the first time, the people of Earth felt safe, not because others allowed it, but because they had earned it with their own hands. On Mars, survivors of the attack gathered under the open sky, their tears mixing with hope. They had seen destruction, but they had also seen the power of their defenders. They knew the Dominion would never take them so lightly again. Among the pilots, there was quiet joy mixed with grief. Ethan Brooks sat with his squadron, remembering the faces of friends who had not returned. Natalie Green rested beside him, her eyes distant as she thought of the lives lost at Europa. They knew victory always came with a price, but they also knew that price had secured a future for billions. Their names would not be remembered by all, but their courage would live on in every free breath humanity took. The Dominion, humiliated and broken, retreated to their own territory. Their leaders swore revenge, but their fleets were in ruins, and their soldiers feared the humans they once mocked. Other races across the stars watched with unease. Some felt anger, afraid of what a strong Earth might mean. Others felt hope, seeing in humans a new ally against their own oppressors. The galaxy was shifting, and at the center of that shift stood Earth, no longer small, no longer silent. Commander Hayes knew this was only the beginning. He returned to Earth, where he met with President Carter, General Lewis, and Admiral Carter. They spoke of the future, of alliances and threats, of peace and war. Hayes told them the Council would not forget so easily, and neither would the Dominion. He said the galaxy would test humanity again and again, but he believed they were ready. He looked at the faces of his leaders, and he saw the same determination he felt inside. They were united, stronger than ever, and their secret had become their strength. At night, Hayes stood outside the base in Nevada, looking at the stars. The desert was quiet, the air cool against his skin. He thought of the council chamber, of the laughter that had once filled it, and of the silence that had replaced it. He thought of the fleet sleeping above, orbiting like guardians in the night sky. He thought of the families safe in their homes, unaware of how close they had come to destruction. And he thought of the future, of the challenges yet to come. A small smile touched his lips. The galaxy had mocked Earth, but in their arrogance, they had awakened something greater than they understood. Far above him, the USS Horizon moved through the darkness, its engines glowing faintly. On its bridge, Admiral Laura Carter stood watch, her eyes scanning the stars. She knew threats would come again, but she also knew her people were ready. Around her, officers worked quietly, their voices calm, their hands steady. The ship was more than steel and power. It was a symbol of humanity's spirit, unyielding, patient, and unstoppable. The galaxy would never be the same. The secret had been revealed. The laughter had ended. Humanity had shown the truth. They were not weak. They were not silent. They were strong, united, and ready to defend their place among the stars. And though enemies would come, though challenges would rise, one fact would remain unbroken. They had mocked Earth, but now they would never forget the day the hidden fleet appeared and changed everything.